out in the votes and proceedings for today, which will be circulated with the order paper in tomorrow's vote bundle, available online and from the vote office. Order. Questions to the Minister for the Cabinet Office. Julie Elliott.
Number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Minister John Penrose.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I will answer questions 1 and 7 together. The Electoral Commission will publish its assessment of the first full registers under IER in the spring next year. In the meantime, Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted to inform the House that the transition to IER is now complete. Ghost entries of people who have died or moved house have been removed. We now have a register that is cleaner, more accurate and less vulnerable to fraud than ever before. And this is a vital foundation stone as we move on to the next big challenge, finding people who are legally entitled to vote but have never been on the register, such as expats, students and people in private rented accommodation, and persuading them to sign up.
Julie Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for the response. However, university towns and cities are some of the worst affected areas by the government's rushed changes to IER. Will the government allow universities to block register to their students this year?
Mr. Speaker, I think the Honourable Lady and I may mean slightly different things by block registration, but I think there is common ground in that there is some very useful and effective new work being done in places like Sheffield, which is dramatically improving student registration rates. And with any luck, we can take their example and persuade others to do the same.
Gerald Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Electoral Commission states that 51% of 16 to 17-year-olds are registered compared to 95% of over 65. The government has opposed votes for 16 in the upcoming EU referendum and now won't even ensure that young people have a voice. Could I ask why the government are so indifferent to a whole generation?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we addressed this at some length yesterday in the referendum bill votes. And this is now the 3rd or 4th time that this House has addressed this issue, and in each case has returned pretty solid majorities against this motion, against this idea. Fundamentally, Mr. Speaker, the vote yesterday was because we didn't think that it was sensible to change such a fundamental piece of the franchise for just one vote. I think that would leave us open to charges of trying to sway the franchise for the EU referendum to favour one side or the other, something which I'm sure no one would support.
Sir Gerald Howarth.
Mr. Speaker, can I encourage my honourable friend to look at the question of postal voting? Leaving aside what may or may not have happened at the recent by-election, is it not the case that registering for a postal vote is far too easy these days and renders the whole system open to very serious abuse?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is entirely right. There are large numbers of people who are concerned about this. I am happy to tell him that Sir Eric Pickles, the honourable gentleman for Brentwood and Ongar, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, is at this moment considering a report, and if my honourable friend has any suggestions about what might be in it, he's very welcome to make suggestions to my honourable friend.
Mr. Tom Watson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm glad the Minister has noticed there was a parliamentary by-election in Oldham last week. And when he carefully studies the figures, he will see that there are 1,814 fewer voters in Oldham, West and Royton than there were at the general election. If those figures are extrapolated across the country, it shows there will be over 1 million fewer people registered than a year ago. This was predicted. It has happened intentionally. By design, this Minister is responsible for silencing the voices of over 1 million voters in Britain. How does he feel about being the only Minister in British history to disenfranchise 1 million people?
Mr. Speaker, I can see that the conspiracy theorists are out in force this morning. The people who will... The register entries that will have been crossed off as a result of the individual electoral registration introduction, a measure which incidentally was supported by the party opposite in principle, will be people who have died or people who have moved house. Anybody who is a legitimate elector, who has a pulse, will be able and will have been confirmed on the electoral register, and if anybody is worried they may not be, Mr. Speaker, they can register online before May, and it takes less than 3 minutes, less time to boil an egg, and they will get their vote.